Hello everyone, welcome back. It's episode number 111 of Spectator Sports. I'm your host Sebastian Fonseca. We got a loaded episode for you guys today. Before I get into it, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. If you guys are new to Spectator Sports and you want to help this channel grow, please do us a massive favor. Drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, it really helps us out. Even comments are greatly appreciated. And if you want to have clips or get some clips from this episode, we have it here on YouTube as well as TikTok. And you want to enjoy Spectator Sports as an audio experience, we got that too. Head over to Spotify, all links are in the description, and let's get into today's episode. Breaking news coming out of the NBA, and Karl Anthony Towns is heading to the Big Apple to play for the New York Knicks in a trade that was announced on Friday night. And what the Minnesota Timberwolves get back in return is Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo and the first round pick that was originally the Detroit Pistons. Looking at what this means, this is big time move for the New York Knicks, who've made a ton of moves this offseason thanks to Jalen Brunson taking a pay cut with his extension, and that allowed them to bring in Mikal Bridges. And it was temporarily the Nova Knicks. You had Donte DiVincenzo, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, and you had Jalen Brunson. Now, obviously, Donte DiVincenzo is out, but you still have a very talented group of Nova guys, and all led by Jalen Brunson. I mean, he was an all-star last year and very nearly dragged the Knicks to the Eastern Conference Finals if it wasn't thanks to the Indiana Pacers and some injury luck finally catching up to them. But looking at what Cat does for the New York Knicks, I mean, this is a guy that's one of the best shooting big men in the modern NBA. He's able to pick and pop. It would be a great compliment to Jalen Brunson, and he would be able to take another body away from the rim and help Jalen and other guys get to the rim at ease. OG is known to be a slasher to the rim. You have Josh Hart as well, and I think this is a really good move because we knew that once Isaiah Hartenstein left for OKC, this left a huge hole in the middle of the Knicks front line. And yes, you have Mitchell Robinson, but how reliable is he as a player because of his frequent injury history? Wish him nothing but the best, but good move by the Knicks front office. I thought this was a nice move to set them up because everyone we know is chasing Boston. And Boston, I think the absolute factor that sent them over the top was Kristaps Porzingis. We knew about Jaylen Brown, we knew about Jason Tatum, the J&Js, obviously the main heads of the snake, and obviously they have so many capable shooters, Drew Holiday, Derek White, but having a big guy like Kristaps Porzingis and also be a shot blocker as well, I think that's something where you can eliminate that shot blocking prowess and have Cat out of the perimeter kind of waiting in the three-point corner or a pick and pop situation like I said, and that would help create some driving lanes and have the rim a little bit more open than when Kristaps Porzingis is patrolling the paint. Now, obviously, Boston will still be the projected favorite, and I think that out of a team like Boston in the field, it's still something where you would probably pick Boston to repeat as back-to-back championships just because they're so loaded. These Knicks are looking really good. They had to build some chemistry. We know NBA teams are just not built in an off-season. It's built over an entire regular season. Let's hope the injury gods are nicer to them this season. Going to the Timberwolves sides of this, mainly driven by financial purposes. The Timberwolves had an opportunity to extend Karl Anthony Towns, but they decided not to. And you get Julius Randle, who absolutely could be getting an extension later on. He'll probably play out the final year of his contract, and the Knicks were thinking of extending him too, but I think the bargaining price, or at least the two sides, couldn't come to a mutual agreement, so hence the trade. I think the nuance in this is not only do you get Julius Randle in this, where he's probably another guy that's similar to Karl Anthony Towns, but maybe wouldn't really occupy the similar areas that Rudy Gobert would occupy. But Donte DiVincenzo, I think, is a guy that can add some bench depth for this team because outside of Anthony Edwards, there isn't really a guy that can create his own shot. We saw that against the Dallas Mavericks. It was really Anthony Edwards and a guy that needed to have somebody else help them set up a shot. They just have a really good group of guys that can be 3-and-D wing defenders and can get after you. We saw that in the Western Conference semifinals against the Denver Nuggets. They harassed Jamal Murray all game long. But this adds an offensive punch for this Timberwolves team. So this is a rare case where, yes, you give up a star in this league, but you still get some very good return on the investment. I also have to credit the Minnesota Timberwolves for doing this maybe a year early and maybe not a year late. We could know that they might be able to get a little bit more for Karl Anthony Towns, but I think they struck while the iron was still hot. He didn't have the best of seasons in the last couple of years. Cat has missed some time, let's be honest here. So he still has some really good value, and you get this Detroit pick that could be something of value later on, whether it's something you use as a trade tool later or you invest in that pick and get some younger additional talent. But either way, I think both sides get an A for this deal, and now let's see how this deal actually gets executed when the season starts in October. Rewinding to last Thursday night's matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants, the Cowboys are coming off of two bad losses where their run defense was absolutely getting gashed between the Baltimore Ravens or the New Orleans Saints. Now, the Giants definitely could not get anything going, and I think that's more to do with the poor offensive line play and just Devin Singletary. He just is not seeing holes. We saw him make a zig and zag and try to go east and west in the backfield rather than just try to go north and south. Now, this win came at a hefty price for the Dallas Cowboys because, yes, the offense got going. We saw some good play between Dak and CD linking up for a touchdown, but defensively had some injuries. Trayvon Diggs left the game with cramps briefly but came back. Nothing serious there, but two serious injuries is DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons. Now, DeMarcus Lawrence unfortunately suffered a foot injury. He's going to be heading to short-term IR, out for the next 4 games. And Micah could probably miss about 2 to 3 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Now, they do have this mini bye, and there's still an outside shot of him playing next week. But it would be wise for the Dallas Cowboys, especially with this guy coming up for a contract extension. You want to protect your asset and probably have him rest at least 1 to 2 games. High ankle sprains are tricky, and you absolutely do not want to re-aggravate that type of injury. For a guy that depends on that twitchiness and that burst, launching himself off that ankle to get to the passer. Now, for the grand scheme of things in this game, the gap between Dallas and New York isn't that far. While Dallas has destroyed New York for about 13 consecutive games now since Dak has entered the league and started and finished every game, they have destroyed the New York Giants. He's won their last 13 matchups after going 0-2 to start in his rookie year. He's dominated the New York Giants. And now, in this 20-15 victory, you got to think about if there was maybe 1 or 2 chances about the Dallas defense not getting stops in plus side territory and those field goals maybe turning into touchdowns, this game would have been in the favor of the New York Giants. And yes, Daniel Jones, I've been on this channel saying that he hasn't been good. He's probably slated to be replaced. That may be true, but I also can be objective and say that his play on Thursday night was solid. Yes, he missed a throw that could have been a touchdown to Darius Slayton, but that was still a free play. Has nothing to really lose on that, but overall, I think he played pretty well. Malik Neighbors is clearly the Giants' best playmaker, and Brian Dable has done everything he can to scheme plays to get him the ball in space and have him a chance to do something with that. And Daniel Jones, despite his flaws, may have something where he plays out this year, and we know that it's probably going to be a mutual agreement that him and the Giants part ways, but this is something where he's auditioning for his next team. And maybe he'll be like a Sam Darnold or a Baker Mayfield, where you probably take some licks, you're a backup for a couple years, you wait for the right opportunity, you wait for the right scheme, the right support group, and then you reset your career in your next contract. With Dallas, they have so many injuries now, plus these big contracts and an older roster because Washington is coming up the pipeline. We've seen Jaden Daniels light up the field in 4 games already, and they have yet to play Dallas, but that'll be an exciting matchup later. The Giants are slated. They have some foundational pieces up front defensively. They have a good left tackle. They have a good wide receiver. Now they have basically the foundation pieces for a house, but now you have to get the final touches and make this look presentable for somebody to live in. And that's next year's draft for the New York Giants. They're going to get a quarterback. They're going to get somebody that fits Brian Daboll's scheme. And eventually they'll be able to overtake the Dallas Cowboys in this NFC East. The Minnesota Vikings travel to Green Bay, and this is Jordan Love's first start since spraining his MCL in the opening Brazil game down in Sao Paulo. Now, Malik Willis, I think, has done fantastic in substitution of Jordan Love, guiding the Green Bay Packers to 2 victories. And it definitely caused some type of concern, I think, in Jordan Love's camp where, you've struggled in some where you haven't been on the field, and there's this young quarterback who has been solid. I mean, he has just gotten into the building at the end of the training camp preseason period and has already done really well in this offense. And you could see him probably force some things. He came into this game with a Brett Favre jersey, and I thought he had the perfect tribute to Brett Favre. 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, forcing balls where they don't have to be. That's a perfect tribute to Brett Favre. Now, all things being serious, Jordan Love still doesn't look totally healthy, and there was definitely some things where you could see him forcing some things into traffic and putting the ball in harm's way, just some things you're just not supposed to do. And I think this is something where Matt LaFleur, the Packers front office, have to come back and sit down with Jordan to think about what's in his best interest for him and the team. While he might be very talented and this Packers team is going to be the team of the future in this division, they have to think about game by game what's best for the team. And if he's not 100%, he's not 100%. Let him rest. You have a quarterback. And regardless, whether it was Malik Willis or Jordan Love, I don't think either team was beating this Vikings team because they got after it defensively. And let's face it, Sam Darnold is already the front runner for the MVP. After a quarter mark in this season, I think he's looked really, really good. Coming off a performance where he had 4 touchdowns, he followed up with 3 touchdowns in this week. And now he has 11 total touchdown passes on the season. So Sam is really finding ways to get the ball out to not just Justin Jefferson, but other guys. I've said this since the 49ers game. I think he's been able to distribute the ball and run this O'Connell offense to perfection. And there was an absolute great ball placement example where he got the ball and targeted the Jair Alexander replacement in Cordy Ballantyne and put it right on the money for Justin Jefferson, only where Justin Jefferson could catch the ball. And for Sam, again, this resurgence in his career is absolutely being put on notice. And now they're 4-0. They've had to stave off a big Packers rally after being up 28-0. But at the end of the day, when you're up 28-0, it's very hard to give up that lead, especially when it's only a quarter, maybe 2.5 quarters to work with after being up for so long. Time is against you. They're demanding bigger plays out of it to cover that yardage. And there was absolutely opportunities for the Vikings to slam the door shut on this to make it much more of a wider margin of victory than what the final score says, 31-29. I thought this was more of a 40-25 type of game, a 15-point margin where the Packers come back, make it a game. But still, credit the Minnesota Vikings. They've done really well through 4 games. And I still need more of a sample size. It's 4 games. If we get to the halfway point and this Vikings team is still in the 7-1, 8-0 record type of range, and we're still getting quality play from Sam Darnold, I think then we can say that this Vikings team is legit so far, and they can absolutely be NFC contenders. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers ran up and down the Eagles defense, scoring the first 24 points and having basically the game in hand midway through the second quarter. At one point, they had over 200 yards of offense while the Eagles had none. Now, if you're thinking about how the Eagles got here, yes, they were playing in 100-degree heat with humidity. Yes, they didn't have A.J. Brown, no Devontae Smith, no Lane Johnson. Acknowledge that, absolutely. But still, they had Dallas Goedert, who had the game of his life in the previous game against the Saints, and still have Saquon Barkley. And you would think, being bereft of these weapons on the outside, that they would establish a run game and commit to the running game. No. Nick Sirianni likes to do things his own way and still is putting his nasty little hands on all of this offense that is so talented. He won't let Kellen Moore do his job. Still, we haven't seen the consistency from this team. Week to week, it's been a roller coaster. 1 week they're good, 1 week they're bad, 1 week they're good, 1 week they're bad. And even in stretches of the game, they haven't even put a complete game together. I understand there's new coaches, new lingo, new players, but when are the excuses going to run out for this guy? Because consistency absolutely matters in this league. That brings a winning formula to a certain team. And despite all these changes, 2023 and how it ended is still looming over this franchise, because the way that team ended last year, they lost to Tampa Bay in dominating fashion, lost last week to Tampa Bay in dominating fashion. They have a particular boogeyman in this league, but then the rest of the league is also catching up to the Eagles, where they don't stick to the run. You have Saquon Barkley, and you keep giving it to Jalen, who, let's face it, he has a turnover problem. He had another bad fumble when they had a chance to cut this to a one-possession game, but just didn't do so. Still, defensively, it's been up and down, but still not really consistent. The edges aren't getting any type of pressure, and that's allowing a guy like Baker Mayfield, who didn't have his offensive line at full strength. In fact, the week before, they gave up 7 sacks. They shored that up against a really talented defensive tackle lineup, but didn't get the job done. And Baker Mayfield tore them apart. 347 yards passing and had 3 touchdowns on the day. Just not good enough. I don't know what to really make of the Eagles. As a 2-2 team, they're right there, mediocre, middle of the pack. But this next stretch is going to be pivotal for how we see the 2024 Eagles, because after the bye week, they get some mid-level, weaker competition. There's Cleveland, there's the Jaguars, there's New York in there. And they're going to have to find a way to pull out some wins and get some consistency there. If not, it could be the end of Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia. The Buffalo Bills came into Baltimore sporting a 3-0 record, dismantling the Jacksonville Jaguars on Monday Night Football. And we're expecting a classic duel between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But in fact, it was something else entirely. We got, again, a duplicate performance of King Henry running down a team and gashing them yet again. After beating the Dallas Cowboys and Derrick Henry running all over them for over 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, we saw him do that again to the Buffalo Bills, and it was almost 200 total yards. It was almost 200 yards on the ground, over 200 total yards with a touchdown through the air and 1 on the ground. Could have well been 3, but he fumbled on the goal line and easily could have had a hat trick of touchdowns. But still, this Derrick Henry-led team, this Ravens team is now establishing what they're known to do. That's running the ball, setting up play action for Lamar, and now after an 0-2 start, they're 2-2, looking like a contender yet again in this AFC. It remains to be seen how consistently they can be, but they beat the Bills into submission. And this is where the Bills' defensive issues and lack of bodies through injuries, player movement, whatever have you, is on full display for the entire audience on the national level to see that. They had no answers to stop Derrick Henry, and not many teams do, but there was just so many times guys didn't want to even touch Derrick Henry, and that wore them down, and then they got blown out 35-10, and it just goes to show if you just have a little patience with teams, they can turn things around, and that's what's looking like for the Baltimore Ravens. This past Monday, we heard the unfortunate news of the tragic passing of Dikembe Mutombo, a player known for defensive prowess, anchoring the paint, a famous finger wag, no, not today, 4-time DPOY, 8-time All-Star, Hall of Famer, but a better human than an NBA player. His known work for being a humanitarian from humble roots in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and translated that to an NBA scholarship to play for John Thompson's Georgetown Hoyas, pairing him up with Alonzo Mourning, and eventually being the 4th overall pick in the 1991 NBA draft, ensued to an amazing NBA career. But what he was able to do after retirement in 2009 was instrumental to developing so many towns in Africa and also bringing African talent to the NBA. We saw him build a $29 million hospital in his hometown in the Congo, and he's done so many efforts in terms of bringing awareness to basketball, bringing in African talent to the NBA and the US. His impact is going to be missed, absolutely. What he was able to do and change so many lives absolutely meant the world to so many people, and bigger than life at the end of the day, and bigger impact as a person. So that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, to help us grow and reach a bigger audience, we're going to need some of your help. Drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and you want to get clips from this episode or past episode, because we got some pretty juicy ones, and I'll leave those linked for you in the description. But remember, we also have this as a podcast as well. Link for the podcast audio is also in the description. And I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.